I always knew our neighborhood HOA was strict, but I never imagined one of them would dare to do this. It was a muggy Tuesday afternoon when everything changed. My son, Ryan, was the first to notice the shadow lingering outside our front door, the same door I had locked not 10 minutes earlier before hopping in the shower. He heard the faint scrape of metal, unmistakable if you've ever had your keys jiggle in the lock. But this wasn't me or the mailman. It was Karen. The same HOA Karen who loved to leave passive-aggressive notes about our grass being an inch too long. Only this time she wasn't holding a clipboard. She was holding what she claimed was a master key. Ryan, barely 19 but fiercely protective, flung the door wide open. The look on Karen's face when she realized she'd been caught mid-turn of the handle was priceless, a cocktail of guilt, fear, and the smugness slipping right off her stiff smile. "Can I help you?" Ryan asked, voice calm but eyes narrowed. He recorded every second on his phone. That's how we know exactly what she said. She stammered something about a routine HOA inspection, but who tries to unlock a resident's door without knocking? The neighborhood always felt safe, like everyone's eyes were watching out for each other, but now I had to wonder, were they watching me, or were they spying on me? What did Karen think she'd find inside my house that she couldn't see from the sidewalk? The scariest part? That so-called master key might open more than just her door. Who knows how many other locks she's tried it on, or what she's hiding behind her self-appointed authority. I didn't think my son would push back. I didn't think Karen would panic. But the second he said he was calling the cops, her face turned pale as winter snow, and that's when we realized this was only the beginning. What was she looking for? And what happens when the people meant to protect your privacy become the biggest threat to it? Ryan's video of the confrontation made the rounds on our neighborhood app within hours. Some people were horrified. Others defended her, saying she was just doing her job. But who appointed Karen the keeper of master keys? Let me rewind for a moment. We moved here 3 years ago, mostly for the promise of a peaceful neighborhood with good schools. The HOA sold itself as a guardian of community standards, but from day one, Karen made it clear who really ran the show. If your lawn was too patchy, you get a note. Leave your trash can out a day late? Note. Kids' bikes left on the driveway? Another note. Always the same sharp tone, written on pink slips, taped right to your door. It was annoying but manageable until last year when Karen somehow got herself elected president of the HOA. That's when the so-called security measures began. She pushed for new locks on the community clubhouse, new surveillance cameras on the park entrance, and most unsettling, the HOA master key system for emergency access. No one read the fine print. No one ever thinks they'll be the one to get singled out. But when my husband left for work trips, it felt like Karen's eyes lingered on our house longer than everyone else's. Maybe it was because I work from home, maybe because I refused to sign her petition for additional HOA fees. Ryan, meanwhile, had always hated the HOA's grip. He'd been itching to catch Karen overstepping her bounds. So when he heard the lock rattling, he didn't hesitate. He told me later that Karen looked ready to run, but instead she tried to twist the story, said she thought our front door was ajar and wanted to check on my safety. Except our cameras caught her trying the key on the side gate, too, the one leading to our backyard where she had no business being. That's when the pit in my stomach grew roots. This wasn't about some petty rule. What did Karen think she'd find? And why was she so sure she had the right to look for it? Ryan and I decided not to back down. We printed screenshots, saved every recording, and filed a complaint with the HOA board, but the next morning, the envelope we left in their Dropbox mysteriously vanished. Someone didn't want our story getting out. And if Karen was desperate enough to break into our home, what else was she willing to do to keep her secret safe? Ryan's video spread like wildfire. Within hours, our quiet HOA Facebook group turned into a battlefield of arguments, accusations, and excuses. Some neighbors were shocked. A few called us dramatic. But behind every comment, I could feel something bigger brewing. People were starting to wonder just how many doors Karen had tried her so-called master key on. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying the moment in my head, her hand trembling on the doorknob, her eyes darting at Ryan's phone camera like she'd been caught with her hand in the cookie jar. What would have happened if my son hadn't been there? The next morning, Ryan and I sat down at our old oak kitchen table to piece together everything we knew. We pulled up old HOA newsletters, highlighted sections about routine inspections, and found the clause buried in fine print about authorized entry in cases of community safety threats. But nowhere did it say they could unlock someone's home without notice or worse, without permission. It wasn't the first time Karen had crossed the line. A few months ago, she'd shown up in our backyard claiming she'd seen a suspicious figure. Turns out it was just my brother visiting from out of town, smoking by the fence. She even threatened to fine us for unauthorized guests. My husband Mark used to brush it off. He'd say, "She's harmless, just nosy." But now that he was away on another work trip, her behavior felt less harmless and more invasive. And my gut told me this was more than a control freak's power trip. Ryan, always more resourceful than I give him credit for, started pulling up footage from our old security cameras. What we found made my stomach turn. There she was, Karen, lingering by our side gate last month, glancing over her shoulder like she knew she shouldn't be there. In another clip, she peeked into her mailbox. I felt exposed in my own home, the place where I was supposed to feel safest. And yet, when we tried to share the footage with the HOA board, we got nowhere. The HOA secretary who used to wave at me every morning told me to stop stirring up drama. She claimed there was no record of Karen being given a master key, but the key clearly existed. And if Karen had it, who else did? The part that chilled me most was the rumor Ryan uncovered online. A former resident, a retired couple who'd moved out last year, posted anonymously about how they'd found signs that someone had been inside their house when they weren't home. Little things moved, drawers left ajar. They couldn't prove anything, so they let it go. But now I couldn't help but wonder if Karen had practiced on them before she tried us. Neighbors started coming to our door quietly, asking questions they didn't dare post in the group chat. Did we think Karen had copies of their keys, too? One mom told me she'd heard Karen brag about her emergency override access at a holiday party. Another neighbor swore he saw her snooping around his garage. The more we uncovered, the more desperate I felt. We were standing up against someone who could twist every rule in her favor, someone who'd already proven she didn't mind bending the law if it suited her. But the worst part was that Karen knew we knew. And the next day, we woke up to find a note. Not her usual pink slip this time, but a plain envelope taped to our door. Inside was a single typed sentence. "Some things are better left locked." My hands shook as I read it. Ryan wanted to call the police right then and there, but I needed answers. What was Karen so afraid of us finding out? And what if opening that door had unlocked a threat we couldn't close again? The envelope sat in the middle of our kitchen table like a bomb no one wanted to touch. Ryan kept pacing, his phone in one hand, the other balled into a fist. I'd never seen him this rattled. Not when he broke his leg skateboarding, not even when his dad moved out for work last year. "This is a threat, Mom," he said, voice low but sharp. "She's not just spying anymore. She's warning us to back off." I wanted to believe it was just intimidation, that Karen was bluffing, trying to scare us into silence. But the pit in my stomach told me she had help. Someone on the HOA board was covering her tracks. How else could our formal complaint vanish overnight? The next day, I found out just how deep this rabbit hole went. I stopped by my neighbor Janice's house, an older woman who'd lived here since the neighborhood was built. She used to be friendly with Karen, back when the HOA was mostly bake sales and garden tours. But she'd grown distant after Karen started pushing her security measures. When I asked if she'd ever heard of the master key, her eyes flicked toward the security camera above her door. She pulled me inside and whispered like we were fugitives. Janice confessed that years ago, the HOA drafted an emergency access plan in case of natural disasters, tornadoes, floods, but the keys were supposed to be kept in a locked HOA office. No one person was meant to have one alone. Karen took the plan, Janice said. She said it was safer in her hands. Her hands trembled as she poured us tea. She made copies, didn't she? I felt sick. How many of us were living behind unlocked doors without even knowing it? Meanwhile, Ryan started digging up dirt of his own. He found out Karen had an old lawsuit sealed years ago, a trespassing charge that got dismissed. He also found receipts for community surveillance upgrades she billed the HOA for but never installed. Thousands of dollars vanished into who knows where. And that's when the subplot twisted into something I didn't expect. The person we thought was on our side, our friendly neighbor Mark next door, turned out to be the vice president of the HOA board. He'd always dropped by with leftover barbecue or a spare set of tools when we needed them. But when Ryan confronted him, Mark refused to answer a single question about the master key. "Be careful what you poke your nose into," he said to Ryan. "Some secrets are bigger than you." It stung, betrayal disguised as neighborly charm. Ryan told me later he saw Mark and Karen arguing in his driveway that night. They kept glancing at our house, voices low but tense. Mark waved a stack of papers in her face and Karen shoved him so hard he stumbled back against his car. We realized they weren't on the same side, they were fighting over control. Maybe Karen had dirt on Mark or maybe Mark was done being her puppet. Either way, the cracks in their alliance meant we weren't just up against one person anymore. We were tangled in a web of secrets, grudges, and lies that could unravel the whole HOA if we pulled the right thread. The fear was real, but for the first time, so was the hope. If these people were turning on each other, maybe we could expose what they'd done. Ryan started drafting a neighborhood petition for an emergency HOA meeting, hoping to get enough signatures to force an investigation. He even got Janice and 2 other longtime residents on board. But late that night, as I lay in bed listening to the wind rattle the window, I saw headlights sweep across our lawn and pause. A car idled at the curb for a long minute before slowly rolling away. Someone was watching us, and now they knew we weren't backing down. That night, sleep was out of the question. Every creak of the house, every car passing on the street, made my skin prickle. I kept replaying the flicker of headlights across our lawn. Was it Karen? Mark? Someone else entirely? By morning, Ryan was already pacing in the kitchen, coffee mug clutched in his hands like a lifeline. He'd been up all night drafting the petition for an emergency HOA vote. It was risky, Karen would see it as a direct threat, but he didn't care. If the HOA board wouldn't investigate her abuse of the master key, the neighborhood would have to force their hand. I called Janice to check in. She answered on the first ring, voice tight. "I'm in," she whispered. "But you should know, Karen came by last night. She asked if I'd been talking to you." I froze. "What did you say?" "I lied," Janice said. "I told her I've been sick in bed for days." She didn't believe me. She kept looking around like she expected you to pop out of my pantry. I pressed my palm to my forehead, trying to stop the wave of dread. Karen wasn't just trying doors now. She was sniffing out every ally we had left. By the afternoon, Ryan and I had gathered half the signatures we needed. Some neighbors opened their doors wide, ready to sign. Others peeked through blinds and said they didn't want to get involved. Fear kept them frozen, the same fear Karen was banking on. And then, just as the sun dipped behind the trees, everything tilted. I was sorting old HOA newsletters when Ryan came barreling in from the garage, eyes wild. "Mom, you have to see this." He led me out back, to the old garden shed we barely used anymore. Ryan had found fresh boot prints in the mud by the door, small, precise. Karen's size, maybe? He flicked on the flashlight and pointed to a loose board. Wedged behind it was a plastic bag, duct-taped shut. My heart hammered. We peeled it open on the workbench under the single bare bulb. Inside were photocopies of HOA master key templates, dozens of them with residents' addresses scrawled in Karen's tidy handwriting. There were also receipts, printed emails, and one damning letter signed by Mark, our so-called friendly neighbor. In it, he approved emergency access drills with Karen. But the dates on the letters matched weekends when neighbors had reported odd things: jewelry missing, backyard gates ajar, strange noises in the middle of the night. It wasn't just snooping. It was systematic and covered up. Ryan's hands shook as he snapped photos. "We have her," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "This is it, Mom. This is how we blow it wide open." But as the relief settled in, the dread returned tenfold. Because if Karen found out we'd uncovered her stash, she'd have nothing to lose. Suddenly, the shed's side door rattled. We both jumped. Footsteps crunched in the gravel just beyond the wall, slow, deliberate. A shadow passed across the dirty window. I clutched Ryan's arm, both of us holding our breath. Whoever was out there paused, then retreated into the darkness. We waited, hearts pounding, until the night swallowed every trace of movement. We rushed back inside, deadbolt every door, and called Janice. She didn't pick up. We called Mark's number next, voicemail. Ryan wanted to drive over to check on Janice, but I held him back. It felt like bait, like we were being herded into the open. That's when my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "Drop the petition, or the shed won't be the only place we look." Ryan read it over my shoulder, his fists clenched. But I could see it in his eyes, not fear, but fury. He was done hiding. "I'm taking this to the news if I have to," he said. "They can't shut all of us up." And I knew, in that moment, There was no going back. We were standing on the edge of something that could shatter the whole neighborhood, if we didn't get crushed first. Neither Ryan nor I slept that night. Every creak of the floorboards felt like footsteps coming for us. I checked the locks 3 times, peered through the curtains at the empty street, then checked again. The threat in that text clung to the walls like smoke. Drop the petition, or the shed won't be the only place we look. At sunrise, Ryan slammed down his mug and said, "I'm done waiting for Karen to make the next move." He pulled up his email, attached the photos we'd taken of the evidence, and sent them to every neighbor on our contact list. He copied the local news too, just in case. I half expected a squad car or Karen herself to come pounding on our door within the hour. But instead, the neighborhood turned into a powder keg of whispers and doorbell cameras. Some neighbors thanked us. Some told us to mind our own business. But one message made my heart stutter. It was from Mark, the HOA vice president who'd signed off on Karen's emergency drills. The same Mark who'd always lent us tools, barbecued with us, and gave Ryan his first summer job mowing lawns. He asked to meet alone. He said he had something to confess. Ryan refused to let me go alone. We met Mark at the community park under the old oak tree right by the playground where Ryan used to push his trucks through the mulch when he was 5. It was broad daylight, kids playing nearby, birds chirping, but I'd never felt so exposed. Mark looked like he hadn't slept in days. His hair was messy, shirt untucked. He handed me a crumpled envelope before I could even ask. "Karen's not the only one," he said, voice cracking. I didn't know how far she'd go. Inside the envelope were copies of bank statements. HOA funds that should have paid for security upgrades, maintenance, and repairs, all siphoned off into dummy accounts. Mark's signature was on every line. But that wasn't the worst part. There were payoffs, 2 tiny amounts, hush money slipped to other board members. Mark said Karen blackmailed him years ago, threatening to reveal an old DUI that would ruin his job at the county office. "She made me sign off on it all," he whispered. "And when I wanted out, she threatened my family." Ryan's face was stone. "So you let her have a master key? You let her sneak into people's homes?" Mark shook his head. "I didn't know she was doing that. She told us it was just a backup system for the clubhouse. But when people started moving out, she'd use their empty houses to store, I don't even know, boxes, files, maybe worse." A chill danced up my spine. What was Karen hiding that she needed empty homes to stash it? And why did she panic so hard when Ryan caught her at our door? I asked Mark point-blank if he'd help us expose her. His shoulders sagged. "If I testify, she'll drag me down with her. My wife will leave me. I'll lose everything." Ryan didn't flinch. "And what about everyone she's hurt? You get to keep your secrets, but we're the ones who get threats on our doorstep." Mark looked away, ashamed. "If you push her too far, she'll make sure you have nothing left, too." Before we could say more, Ryan's phone buzzed. A neighborhood mom had just posted to the HOA group chat, Karen was spotted at Janice's house, banging on her door, shouting about traitors. She was unraveling. Mark turned pale. "She'll come for you next." Ryan didn't care. "Good," he said. "Let her." But as we turned to leave, Mark grabbed my arm. "There's one more thing, she keeps us safe. In her garage. That's where she hides the real dirt." A new question hit me like a punch to the gut. What if the real secret wasn't just snooping or stolen money? What if Karen had something in that safe that could destroy every single person who ever crossed her? Back home, Ryan laid out our options. We could back down, pray the petition worked, or we could break Karen's lockbox wide open before she came after us again. For the first time, I felt the tiniest spark of hope burn brighter than my fear. Maybe the key to this whole nightmare wasn't hidden in our shed, maybe it was locked in hers. We didn't waste a single minute after Mark's confession. By the time the sun dipped below the rooftops, Ryan and I were standing in the shadow of Karen's garage, a place I'd driven past 1,000 times without ever suspecting it might hold the key to our whole neighborhood's secrets. Ryan's knuckles were white around the bolt cutters he'd borrowed from Mark's shed. He wasn't scared anymore, just angry focused. I swear I could still feel Karen's eyes on us, like she was waiting in the dark to pounce if we got too close. We knew she was out. Someone texted they'd seen her storming into another neighbor's yard, yelling about traitors. This was our one window. I kept watch while Ryan worked the lock on her side gate. The metal snapped clean, echoing too loud in the summer air. Inside the garage, the smell of old oil and dust was so thick it stuck to my tongue. Boxes were stacked to the ceiling, files, receipts, binders marked HOA business in neat block letters. But tucked in the corner, half hidden under a tarp, sat the small fireproof safe. It was battered, the dial scratched up like she'd opened and closed it 1,000 times. Ryan knelt down, hands steady. "She probably uses her anniversary," he said. He was right, 2 tries, and the lock clicked open. My heart slammed against my ribs when he lifted the lid. Inside were folders, not just on us, but on everyone. Every house in the neighborhood, cataloged with photos, copies of mail, utility bills, even medical records for some people. Karen had been spying for years, building leverage on every resident like a queen hoarding secrets as currency. And at the bottom, a manila envelope with my name on it. My breath caught in my throat when I opened it. Old bank statements, some private messages I'd sent a friend about wanting to leave the HOA, things she'd twisted into evidence of wrongdoing. Blackmail material, plain and simple. Ryan looked up at me, his eyes blazing. "This ends now." We grabbed everything we could carry, folders, photos, even her handwritten notes about emergency entries. By the time we slipped out, headlights turned the corner. Karen's car. She must have come back early. We bolted through the neighbor's yard, hearts pounding, the safe's contents stuffed in our backpack. Karen's furious voice echoed through the night behind us. But I didn't feel afraid, not anymore. She'd spent years trying to lock this neighborhood up tight with her lies and threats. Tonight, we broke her biggest lock wide open. The next morning, we met with half the neighborhood on Janice's porch. We laid it all out. Every folder, every secret she thought she'd keep buried. The truth spread like wildfire, just like Ryan's first video. As Karen's reign cracked under the weight of her own paranoia, the entire neighborhood rallied for a vote to dissolve the HOA board and start over. Karen tried to shout us down, but this time her key couldn't open a single door. And when the news vans pulled up and the sheriff's car rolled in, I looked at Ryan and knew we'd done it. We'd finally taken our home back. By the end of that week, Karen was gone. She didn't even wait for the final HOA vote to come down. She packed up her boxes of pink slips and community guidelines, slammed her door shut for the last time, and disappeared like a ghost who'd finally been dragged into the light. In the days that followed, the neighborhood felt different, lighter, somehow. Doors we'd once kept locked tight now swung open for neighbors we'd only waved at from a distance. People came by with casseroles and folding chairs, sitting in driveways sharing stories about all the times they'd felt watched but brushed it off. It turned out none of us were imagining it. Karen's secrets had poisoned every corner of this community, but exposing them forced us to see each other again, not as rule breakers or violators of the HOA code, but as real families who wanted the same thing, a place where we could feel safe. Ryan became a local hero of sorts, the kid who stood up to the HOA when the adults were too afraid to question it. At first, he hated the attention. But when an older neighbor shook his hand and thanked him for giving me my home back, I saw something shift in him. The morning after the final vote, we gathered on Janice's porch again. The same spot where we'd laid out Karen's dirty secrets for everyone to see. The new interim board, neighbors we actually trusted, voted to shred every copy of her blackmail files. One by one, those manila folders turned to ashes in Janice's old metal burn barrel. Standing there, I felt the knot in my chest finally loosen. For the first time in years, I didn't worry about who was watching me come and go, or whether my front door would rattle in the night. We'd unlocked more than Karen's safe. We'd unlocked the fear that kept us divided and small. Later that night, I found Ryan sitting on the porch swing, staring up at the stars. I asked him if he'd do it all again, the videos, the late nights, the risk. He just nodded. People shouldn't be afraid in their own homes, he said. Not because of some key or some note on the door. He was right. A home is supposed to keep your family in, not your neighbors out. Not secrets locked up so tight they fester in the dark. Before we went back inside, I thought about what we'd tell people who asked how we did it. How we found the courage to stand up to someone who held power over everyone for so long. And the truth is, it didn't feel brave. It felt necessary. If you've ever felt like you had no voice in your own neighborhood, remember this: it only takes one person, one moment of opening the door, literally or figuratively, to break a lie apart. And once you do, you'll find out how many people have been waiting to stand beside you all along. We still have work to do. The HOA needs rebuilding from the ground up, new rules, real transparency, actual neighbors looking out for each other, not spying on each other. But for now, we can breathe. We can plant flowers in the yard and let them grow wild if we want. We can sit on the porch swing at midnight, no blinds drawn, no secrets gnawing at the walls. And every time I hear that door lock click behind me, it's not fear I feel, it's freedom. The key to any good neighborhood isn't the lock on your door, it's the trust you build when you open it. So if you made it this far, do me a favor, like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and tell me in the comments, what would you do if your Karen came for your keys? Let's make sure none of us ever have to face that kind of fear alone again.